So, Lonnie, I'm super excited to have you today. I've done a couple of these podcast interviews thus far with past clients. You're the first interview that I've got to do with an existing client, so I'm stoked about that. Neither one of my previous interviews were folks that were from the industry that I essentially grew up in. So this makes it kind of cool to have this conversation with you because we've both came up through the home building industry. I just retired from that career, and that what actually segued into our work together. So we've both been senior level executives at a home building organization. You're still in that role today. So that part is super cool for me. I wanted to start the conversation with how we met originally, which I think was through the Home Builders Association and the probably safety, that kind of thing. But eventually that led to us having a lunch together and then just talking about life and things of that nature.
Correct.
So maybe just a little bit of color around our first meeting and how we ended up getting together.
Yeah, so we had set up aside basically an appointment to meet up and kind of talk one-on-one because anytime that we'd been around each other previously, it was almost in a group setting,
Right.
which is always different. The dynamic is different. So when we met up for lunch and we were talking about our personalities, not just safety and our jobs, but our personal lives as well, I felt we definitely aligned.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point in time, when you had mentioned that you were moving into coaching, etc., that's when the light bulb went off for me.
Mm.
And I thought to myself, I've been wanting to do something like this. And it's always very important to me that I'm intentionally moving in a certain direction. I don't want to just kind of whimsically move to and fro, so to speak. So I felt that you could provide some great direction, and seeing as how we've been in the same industry and you have many, many years as a corporate warrior, that was a big part of it.
Right.
So at that point in time, I asked you if you'd be interested in taking on another client. You said that you were. I was very excited about that, by the way.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Right. And then I think what struck me from the outset was even from that, our previous interactions, and then actually, I think it was a safe job conduct walk is where that's what it was now that I remember. Anyway, what struck me was your bias towards personal development and professional development. And I said, like, wow, here's a guy that's pretty squared away. Like my sense was like Lonnie's pretty squared away before he met Jeff, right? And then we started talking, and that gave I would call it almost like a jumping off point, right? So that's
absolutely
how it felt to me.
Well, we can always do better because better never stops, right?
Right.
And I think everybody can use a coach depending on whatever it may be, whether it's relationships, business, personal, etc.
Right.
And as I mentioned to you before, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he had a coach. Let's face it, he knew what he was doing.
Right.
But he still had a coach. Why? Because it's necessary.
Right. Always striving for better.
Absolutely.
Cool. So one of the first places that I typically will start with my clients is a foundational process, which is a one-page plan for your life, which has the elements of core values and core competencies and a purpose statement and goals and all of these things. And when we were talking a little bit in our pre-work, I think I said to you something like, I'm not sure you're the fastest person that ever went through that process, but without, researching it, I would probably guess that you are, because we started working together in April and I started introducing the elements of the one-page plan, including, and if memory serves me, I gave you like the exercise of thinking about core values and, taking those away and thinking about how you might want to implement it as a first step. And then lo and behold, you came back with a whole different work product. So just kind of talk me through that.
Yes. Initially, it was a little intimidating because I thought to myself, what are my values? Do I really have a purpose? And those questions can be intimidating. And of course, everybody has a purpose.
Sure.
It's just stopping and putting some actual thought and then putting it down on paper. That really helped me feel as though I had an edge. And I never thought of that before. I didn't think to do that. And so now having these core values and these core competencies, you need to brag on yourself every once in a while.
Right.
And talk yourself up, because there's something cool about everybody.
Right.
And that caused me to stop and think about things that matter that I just really never put any thought into. And it led nicely into a purpose. And today, it's very clear to me what my purpose is.
Right.
Before that, I'm not so sure that it was.
Yeah. And I think a lot of folks are working with purpose, right? That actually was, like what I was alluding to with your personality type anyway. You're definitely an individual working with purpose. But once you clarify it, right, and now get to the specifics, I said, hey, Lonnie, take the idea, and I think I gave you like an example of my one-page plan. And here, take this through and think about your core values and come back in 2 weeks and let's chat. And what did you bring back?
I brought back my one-page plan.
The entire one-page plan, right?
And I think I even implemented the following month's goals on there.
Right.
I absolutely loved it. I have to say, it really was exciting for me. And so much so that my entire family knows about it. And
awesome.
I discussed it with my wife and my kids.
Awesome. I love that. So the other part that usually comes after a one-page plan with my clients is, I refer to it as the day of Zen in my own world because I take an entire day. I've got a handful of clients that might take that much. Some I refer to it as the Zen model or the Zen for success because some people take a half day or things of that nature. But I'd love to hear from you about how you've used this Zen process in your life and how it's been beneficial.
Yes. Well, initially, the goal was to take a day off or take some time, break away, as you had mentioned, isolate yourself so you can actually have some deep reflection, figure out what your successes were from the previous month, what were your failures, implement those goals into the following month. But I have to say, I failed miserably because of the fact that I'm not good at ignoring my phone. I'm very much programmed to check it, very much staying on top of anything. Somebody needs me, I need to jump on that, especially work related.
Right.
But I have to say that I realized I had to make a change. And that was to focus on a Saturday when I didn't have my kids with me and my wife was working. It led to complete success. Now, would I say that this was a 10-hour day? No. But I could give several hours, 3, 4, 5 hours, no problem, with zero disruption.
Yep.
And I didn't have to have my work phone with me, which allowed me to just disconnect, focus on the task at hand.
Okay. So do you feel like the reflection or the planning for the following month was the most valuable piece for you?
I've always been a planner, but I have to say I've never really reflected and gone deeper into my previous year, my previous month, my previous day, frankly.
Right.
That practice opened up my eyes to how many things we experience, and it really made me understand, we live a lot more than we think we do. We experience far more than we realize. And that was definitely a blessing for me. So I would have to say that the reflection part gave me something that I didn't previously have.
Right. Okay. Is that Zen process in general, I mean, you mentioned like trying to get started and having the fail during a work day week and trying to take a vacation and that kind of thing.
Correct.
And having it work out on Saturday. Did you feel any, or do you even feel any part of this today? Because a lot of folks will tell me when they hear the idea of the Zen, and I start with a day. I start the bidding at a day, and they just can't fathom taking an entire day, off from work or away from their family, or, they're like, Jeff, don't you know how busy I am? I'm like, yeah, well, I know because I've been there, right?
Which is why you're impressing upon everybody to take this day.
Right. Because if you're intentional. So any other feelings about that, or like where you are today versus where you started? I mean, it's from an ROI standpoint, I'm going to assume, regardless of the amount of time you're taking, if it's 3 or 5 hours or whatever, you're feeling a return on that investment in time.
100%. Frankly, I'm accomplishing goals faster than I previously was. And not to be braggadocious, but I feel that I've always been a person that is more motivated than most.
Mm-hmm.
So I was already goal oriented.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy organization and efficiencies. So this was a new toy, a new shiny little object to work with. And I have to say, it's had a big impact.
Fantastic.
So I love it.
Fantastic. So I brought a couple of books today to chat about. The first two, I think the first one I gave you probably like the first time we ever met, or maybe even...
It was at the lunch, I believe.
Yeah, okay. So Safety 24/7 is a book that's written about safety, but I give it to a lot of people because it's thin and it's written like a little parable and you can read it quickly. But I like to say that, this book is as much about leadership as it is about anything.
Absolutely.
Right.
Everything coming from you is about leadership.
Well, yeah. It's an underlying theme, yeah, I guess. So Safety 24/7, and then the other thing, and I think I give you a gratitude?
Certainly did.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, almost everybody that sits in that seat that I interview is, well, and about 10,000 other people that I've given these to. I like to ask about gratitude because I think it's one of the simplest things that you could implement in your life that has the most benefit,
Yes.
right? And I compare and contrast this all the time to what I call harder things like meditation. Like at least for me, meditation was not easy to implement, like getting your mind trained to be quiet and all that, where gratitude, as long as you have a method, and I'm a big fan of written daily, and that's why I like giving this gratitude journal style, because it gives you a place to write in every day, and it's basically just a handful of blank lines. So what I really wanted to ask you based on the book was, tell me about gratitude in your life. I know, that you had, a bias towards gratitude before we even met.
Correct.
But I wanted to just ask about gratitude in general and what that means to you today.
Absolutely. So I feel gratitude is extremely important. And I think that most people don't think about it enough. Because frankly, most people focus on the negative, unfortunately. We pass comments that are positive, people go right to the negative comments. What news gets watched? The negative news. So frankly, everybody needs to shift their focus and put more focus on gratitude. I've always thought about gratitude and taken this into consideration and implemented it in my life, but I never wrote it down. So I've started my day with this. And I had to say that I have noticed I've been repetitive at times, but that's what was on my heart.
Right.
And it's a nice practice to actually write it down so you can refer back to it, because it tracks the entire year.
Right.
What were you experiencing? What were you going through? What were you thankful for? And it's a great reference. So I didn't have that previously. So I immediately went out and got that for a few people myself and passed that along as well.
Paying it forward.
We always need to pay it forward. And frankly, that's one of the best ways for me to learn, is to teach.
Right.
So I have to say it was very effective and an excellent tool.
Fantastic. So the next book is specifically about leadership. So it's the John Maxwell 5 Levels. We spent, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 sessions, maybe.
Correct.
More, going through the book and the material and the process. And I have just a couple of questions that I had jotted down based on, after we went through the entire book and the material and kind of talked to each other or had discussions about how the process worked, then you even decided within your own organization, right, to recommend the book to your peers and your leader, and then, come together at some point in the future and sit down and have more of like a book discussion about it. So in preparation for that, we even built out some like key bullet points.
Correct.
The first one that I wanted to ask you about is, it's a statement right out of the book that says, the highest goal of leadership is to develop other leaders, not to gain followers. And leadership is more than just about doing work. So it really gets to this fundamental element of the highest goal of leadership, developing other leaders. So what I wanted to ask you about, again, I know, you don't get into the kind of position that we're in, senior level operators in a home building organization, without having a bias towards people. I shouldn't have said that, because we have peers that I don't necessarily know that are have that bias. But
Sure.
let's say that it is
it's a key trait.
It's a key. There you go, a key trait.
Absolutely.
So what I was alluding to was, I believe you had that before we even reviewed this material together. But what now has this system or this framework given you to work with that you maybe didn't have before?
Organization. Frankly, the lists throughout each chapter make it so easy to understand where you really are. And the key is to be honest with yourself. We may think that we are better than we are, or we may think that we're not as good as we are. There's people on both ends of that spectrum. So I have to say that this book really helped me to understand exactly where I'm at. It helped me to understand where other leaders are at, because you can start to pinpoint where people are at by watching their successes and their failures, etc. So that was nice. And frankly, it helps everybody to understand what the ultimate goal is. Most publicly traded companies, the idea is to grow the business. That's exactly what investors want to see,
right?
Growth. And frankly, I feel that every single manager, director, VP, division president, area president, etc., all these individuals need to read this book so that they understand proper growth, because it is key. And John C. Maxwell, he's brilliant. Frankly, I'd never even heard of him before you introduced him to me.
Right.
And now I've read 4 of his books. Some are very small and easy to go through. Some are quite the undertaking. But this one was very effective, and it was the first one that you had me read, and I absolutely love it.
Fantastic. Well, I feel the same. So next, I want to talk a little bit about best practices. So after we got through the 5 levels, we started getting into things that weren't necessarily home building specific. They're just best practices that, well, you asked me to share, right? Like, Jeff, okay, so we're both in the same position, but you were doing the same role for 12 years before we met. So can you share with me some of the ideas or philosophies that you have around operational excellence? Is really my holy grail, right? So that's top quartile performance in every significant area of an operation, whether that be the statistical performance or the leadership, culture, all of those things. So we've talked about some very fundamental ones. We had like a single meeting where we talked about effective meetings.
Yep.
If you remember, right? And I have really just a simple 1-page document that talks about, how to tee up a successful meeting. So have you been able to use like the meeting best practice for any of your?
One thing you will learn about me, Jeff, is that I use everything.
Okay.
And if I don't implement it quickly, it will never be used.
Okay.
So frankly, I took advantage of that document right away.
Okay.
I sent it out to the leadership team, and we kind of discussed, what can we do with this? How can we make our meetings more effective? And the funny thing is, our senior leadership team at corporate was having meetings on this very topic.
Okay.
How to have more effective meetings, how to know when you need to eliminate meetings,
Right.
etc., so on and so forth. So when I sent this document out after I made some tweaks and changes to it to visualize it or personalize it for me, my area president was added on that, and he was like, wow, this is amazing. We've just been talking about this. Might I add? And I went ahead and implemented his changes.
Nice.
But you asked me about questioning you on certain things, best practices, etc. I believe that everybody's a teacher and everybody's a student. There isn't a single person in my organization that I can't learn something from.
Sure.
So of course I'm going to be able to learn something from a man of your stature and your experience. So if I'm not asking you specifically about opportunities, then I'm missing the mark.
Right. Well, I think I would just want to give the audience like one quick, maybe we could just give a couple of quick takeaways. So from the meeting best practice, just some of the fundamental things that I see occur that just drive me crazy are like not having an agenda in advance of a meeting. Like we don't even know what we're here to talk about. And then if you do create an agenda, how about sending that to the team before the meeting even occurs, right?
Absolutely.
Or it could be as simple as if you've went ahead and had the agenda and had the meeting, if you don't capture the action items, let's say in the last 5 minutes of the meeting, what are the action items? Who's responsible for them? And what is the next deliverable? Is it the next meeting? Is it you're going to email us back, right?
Absolutely.
And so that's the little bit about the preparation, a little bit about during the meeting. And then the final thing I would say is about after the meeting concludes, right? So to me, it's incumbent upon the person who runs the meeting and creates the agenda to either send like follow-up meeting minutes, and that can be just as simple as if you've quantified what those action items are going to be and who's responsible, if you just memorialize those very quickly in an email and send them back, it's just that simple.
It is. Well, we're all moving so fast.
Right.
And every single day can be a bit of a fire drill. When you think, okay, this is my day tomorrow, halfway through the day, it changes. So frankly, taking a little proactive approach, creating an agenda, it just helps keep everybody on task. Tracking the time helps us know how long does that meeting need to last in the future.
Right.
It's simple things that we kind of look past. So we decided that we want to implement this process in meetings that are not reoccurring, essentially. Anything new, anything out of the norm, we need to have that.
Right.
And frankly, action items, who's going to do what by when, this has always been a very important topic. But it's nice to see it written down.
Yeah, memorial.
Once again, it's highly beneficial.
So one of the other lists that we talked through was a list of items that I call my operational distinctives.
Yes.
It's a list of 10 individual best practices that I think, well, one, I tell people this is how I think, this is what makes business work well. But really, at the end of the day, it's just what makes life work well.
It does.
And so I wanted to ask you about distinctive number one. And I tell people they're all not in priority order, but number 1 and 2 are. And number 2 is reference to leadership.
Yep.
But number 1 on the list is, and I'm going to ask you, how you look at this now versus how you may or may not have before we started talking about it. But distinctive number 1 on the list says, if you want something different, you must do something different or be something different. And when I'm telling somebody about that distinctive, I say, hey, make no mistake, when I say different, I mean better.
Yes.
Right? So tell me your take on that now versus when I first started talking with you about it.
It personalized it. That's the first thing that hit me. Because when you pointed out 1 and 2, and then you basically separated 1 and 2 from 3 through 10. So automatically, I compartmentalized those as something separate in my mind. But personalizing it just kind of gave me a little bit more of accountability.
Okay.
Realizing that this is something that I need to do. This isn't something that somebody else needs to do specifically.
Right.
And when I looked at it that way, I understood, okay, you need to make a change. It obviously needs to be for the better. Do you need to give something some more forward thinking? What is it that I need to do to make fill in the blank this process better?
Mm-hmm.
So that resonated with me very quickly.
Right.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Very nice. So I want to go to the tools, right? So I brought a couple of tools with me today. One of the things that you asked me to do again was share best practices that I've been using throughout my career.
Correct.
And one of the things that I was pretty famous for in my organization is when a new team member started, I gave them literally a little red toolbox full of what I would refer to as, kind of hypothetically tools, which here are a couple of example of said tools, but they're all just, euphemisms for something else. And so, I brought just a few of the tools that are from the box here, whether it's one of these or one of the other tools in the box that we discussed. I think I gave you an example that had all the tools in it. But how did that land with you? And was there a specific tool that resonated, or have you given any thought to how you might use that in the future? Or again, were there any tools specifically?
Yes. Okay. So we're always trying to improve all processes. Taking on too many at once, you start to fall short.
Right.
Okay. So we want to take each one independently and then really dial it in, set it into motion, and then move on to the next one. That has not occurred yet, but we have had pre-discussions. And I have to say, when you're learning something and you have an emotion tied to it, it becomes a permanent memory. That's exactly what this does. When you break out these tools and you discuss what each one of them represents, why, people are more likely to remember that. Mm-hmm. It's going to hit home with them. So there's not one in particular that I felt was any better than the other. It's the package. It's how it's presented.
Right.
Your team members will remember this.
Right.
And frankly, stuff like this travels.
Right.
Other companies will then hear about this little practice.
Right. Hopefully a lot.
Absolutely.
Right.
So I have to say it's very effective, and you can't forget it.
Right. And that was actually part of my strategy. That's why I gave them something tangible, right? And the way that I would typically tell a new team member is like, hey, I want you to take this little toolbox out of here, right? Take it with you. You're going to go through your onboarding process and figure out how we do business here at our company. And then you might not need this, right, for 3 months or 6 months or whatever, but I want you to always keep it like in a visible place where you see the toolbox, and every once in a while open up the lid and look in there. But like there is going to be a time where, we start giving you 12 houses to run, right, on a back end or a front end guy or customer service or whoever, right, when you're managing 50 tickets and one big community with 250 customers in it, right? Like it's a big deal. And
it is.
And we all have those days, right, where you get the tough customer call or the contractor doesn't show up or, whatever it is. And it's like, you might need something and, open that lid back up and remember what those tools stand for.
It provides encouragement.
Yes.
And when you become encouraged, you're fueled. It pushes you forward. It allows you to have that breakthrough.
Right.
And I think we all need those reminders. And when you have anything you can refer back to, whether it's the handwritten notes or something more tangible like this, which is an item, it really hits home, and it can get you through that day, believe it or not.
Right.
Because we have some tough days in this industry.
We certainly can. So I'm gonna ask you, sort of in conclusion, like of all of the things, and I've just tried to take a snippet of things that you and I have worked on together thus far, but is there anything that I didn't ask a question about in our conversation thus far that you would think would be valuable to share? Again, what I'm really trying to do here with my audience is share work that I'm doing, again, as we said in our opening conversation, work that we're actively doing together, right? Like one of the things that we're really working hard on right now is cycle time, for example, right? Because the market has improved from a labor standpoint. Things have kind of cooled off from, white hot, right?
Correct.
And we're past a lot of the supply chain things that were really having a big drag on our throughput, right? Through the post-pandemic and post-pandemic years,
Correct.
right? That system is healing, right? Maybe it's still not 100% healed, but getting better, right?
Right.
And labor, not that it's fabulous right now, but better, than it was. So cycle time's a big thing that we're working on. But really, what I'm trying to do with the audience is share again these tools, philosophies, the strategy that we use when we work together to improve both our business, whether it be through the tools that we're using with our team members or the tools that we're using with our peers, or improving our own personal life by
Right.
getting ourselves to focus more on the positive by using gratitude, or using a one-page plan that now not only do we have a personality type that's working with purpose, but now we're guided on purpose, right? With a plan. So anyway, I just summarize all that now to come back to the final question, which is, I've taken some snippets out of things that we have covered together in our time thus far, but is there anything that I missed asking about that you think would be beneficial for that audience to hear about in our work together? And as you're thinking about that, I'll give you one more. This actually came up in my previous interview with David, where he mentioned, or actually maybe this came up with JT, where I think sometimes you mentioned like hiring a coach and I want to get better and that kind of thing. But I think that might be why some people not resist, but don't even consider hiring a coach, is because they think you're going to like getting conversations with somebody. And next thing you know, I'm going to be saying like, well, Lonnie, how much, what's your body fat percentage? Like, don't you think it could be 8? Like
Sure.
you're a well-built guy, right? But, like, are they going to ask me, like, how much money do I have in my 401k or whatever? And it's like, I'm not here. I mean, maybe if we need to ask those kind of
That's
questions,
right.
but anyway, my whole point is a coach is here to ask questions more than anything, right?
Well, people are scared at times to achieve some stretch goals. And they think, if I have a coach, they're going to force me to do something that I don't want to do. But the truth is, it's nothing like that. Having a coach is more about, you don't know what life is going to throw at you tomorrow. And it's really nice having somebody that you're going to meet with that's giving you their undivided attention and that is going to stop what they're doing and focus on whatever is important to you in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
That's invaluable. And not everybody has that. It's not about forcing you to do things that you don't want to do. It's about having a reliable source whom you respect, has integrity, you can trust. These character traits, this is the type of people you want to surround yourself with, and a coach has to possess these things. So I feel that it's absolutely necessary to have a coach because you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring.
Okay. I like that. Okay. One last question that I did just think of as you were answering, which is, what's the most challenging thing I've asked you to do?
The most challenging thing. Believe it or not, It was probably writing down what I feel my core values are and what my purpose is.
Okay.
Because,
Getting that out of you and
yes,
clarifying it.
because I just feel like that's what an egotistical and, a person that kind of carries themselves in a manner that others don't appreciate.
Okay.
I felt like that would be their type of mindset necessarily. And I didn't realize that, no, it doesn't have to have anything to do with that. It's about knowing where you're going and coming up with a plan on how to get there faster.
Gotcha. All right. I thought you were going to say Toastmasters.
So notice I'm not in there, right?
Well, I noticed you only came to the one session where I invited you.
Two.
Yep. Okay. Two.
Yep.
You
I did
haven't
attend
signed
two.
up.
I did attend two.
No pressure.
No pressure.
Right.
Public
I'm just a
speaking.
coach. I'm just asking questions.
Public speaking is definitely not my thing. Actually, being here on camera is very hard for me.
Okay.
Believe it or not. And when I talk to people about this, they look at me like I'm crazy. What do you mean? What? You
look so comfortable up there. Yeah.
Not at all.
Right. Well, I like to joke with people about, like how, and again, there's probably a handful of 5 or 6 years old kids out there that are comfortable up on stage and singing and that kind of thing, but
it's not me.
It's not natural, right?
Correct.
It's mostly a skill that you have to develop and a muscle.
I'm just very critical of myself.
Right.
And frankly, I have a very high expectation for myself.
Right.
And so when I don't achieve something, I will beat myself up, kind of.
Right.
I will repeat, replay, review. And there comes a point where we need to acknowledge our shortcomings. And then we need to move forward and think about what can I do to get over that.
Totally.
And I'm doing that right now.
Awesome. Well, Lonnie, I want to thank you for your time today and taking the time to sit down and chat about our experience together. And thank you so much.
I appreciate you having me.
Cool.